Good afternoon, everyone. It's great to see some familiar names popping into the room. We're so excited for this important topic this afternoon. The topic du jour, right? Over the last 24 months, we've come to you with different topics, and obviously this is one that is impacting the small to middle market as well as the large market space for quite some time. So working with the small to middle market businesses that we do, we've learned that the current priorities right now are supply chain, labor, and wages. So today we're going to focus on labor, and I'm joined today with a partner of ours from the president of Workberry, Nick Myers. Nick, thanks so much for joining us this afternoon.
I'm glad to be here. Happy to see if we can help get some people some new information.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of small to middle market businesses are looking at each other right now and saying, I don't get it. We're an employer of choice. We pay above market. We have great benefits. We have a great culture. Why am I losing my people? So let's walk through today some of what we've learned. We're going to walk through, and Nick, if you want to flip to agenda, we're going to cover how did we get here to begin with, and what were some of the factors that impacted where we are today. And then where do we stand? What has occurred? What is some of the statistics? What are people seeing and what are we learning? And then moving on to how does this impact your current employees? And how do you put together a strategic plan to ensure that you're retaining the people that you have that are talented and also focused on attracting the right talent? So Nick, take us through a history. How did we get here? What are the factors? What has been the impact?
Sure. So in the not so distant past, we're talking about just under 2 years ago, and for the previous decade, what's been happening is the talent war was really between the large enterprises and small to medium-sized businesses. In fact, for over a decade, 12 years, in fact, consistently, when the NFIB and the Small Business Administration and the Chamber of Commerce, they all do these big surveys of small to medium-sized businesses because they're so critical to our economy. Your clients, in fact, employ just over 51% of the private sector. So it's really important for our economy. So when they survey them, what's your biggest challenge or obstacle, hurdle? For 12 years, it's been our inability to find and hire talent. As you can see in the numbers, it takes small business more than twice as long to fill a position, and it costs them more than twice as much. And that was even prior to our current situation. And that's primarily because you really only have one of two really difficult or bad choices, right? So prior to today with Workberry or whatever, you had one of two things, right? Everybody puts their sign in the window. Everybody does the free stuff, asks your employees, I get that. But when that doesn't work, what are you left with? Either you outsource the whole nightmare to like a staffing agency, a RPO, or like a temp to perm, either way, however you call it, that's very expensive. Its average is around 20% of the annual salary, right? So you're hiring somebody for $40,000 a year, you stroke a check to these guys for $8 grand. It's just not tenable for most small businesses. So the other option that they're left with is having to personally try to play post and pray and navigate. There are literally thousands of job boards now. So, and you guys all know the deal. You pick one or two or three, and you go create a username and log on and password, and then you have to build your company profile, and then you have to write out your job description, and then you have to pay, right? $379 to Monster for one ad for 1 month, or $590 to ZipRecruiter or LinkedIn or Career Builder, Hot Jobs, whatever. Pick your poison. And then you're mostly inundated with a bunch of unqualified noise, right? And so, well, it's a very expensive way to go. It's more importantly, it's a huge time suck for these small businesses. So that's kind of what.
And
go ahead.
Costly, number one, to have the jobs vacant to begin with. And then it's even more costly in some cases to get the wrong person, right? So you've made an investment on having the position vacant. You've now made an investment in the process of attracting someone else. And now you've attracted the wrong person. So it's even more costly because it's costly to the people around them. And then it's also costly if that person ends up not remaining in the organization. And for a small to middle market business that doesn't have a huge budget for this, it could be really debilitating for that business.
Absolutely. I mean, we could do a whole seminar just on the real cost of a vacancy. What does it cost you when you have turnover? What's your cost to fill that turnover? What's the opportunity cost when you can't operate at full capacity? What does that do to your remaining employees when you're having to pay overtime and burn them out, et cetera? So
Absolutely.
let's skip forward and say what's happened here. What has transpired for this current market? Obviously, everybody remembers, when we went into COVID lockdown between March and April, we shed over 20 million. That's actually closer to 22 million jobs. And then we pretty rapidly started to claw back almost 10 million of them. But real unemployment is still at 7.7%, which prior to the pandemic, we were operating around 6%. And so the biggest thing that has really changed is we've seen a drop in labor participation rates from around 63.5 to 61.5%. And what that means is that the population ratio currently working is around 57%, which is down 3.5%. All that math works out to there's about 5.5 million people who have left the workforce permanently. And now we also, on top of those statistics, everybody's been hearing about the Great Resignation, right? There was 20 million people quit their jobs between May and September. So we always hear things like, well, October was a great month because we added about 530,000 new jobs. But what you don't see is we actually there was hiring about 5 million people and 4.4 left, quit. So a lot of those, by the way, are the same people. They're quitting this job to go to that job, but the net incremental growth was 530,000. That was a really good month, and we'll get the new jobs report on Friday. But you think about this, September, 4.4 million was a record. That's 3% of the workforce that basically quit. And right now, in terms of the jobs, we're having the worst conversion rate in history. And so there's currently, it's a supply demand issue. Obviously, we see that there's labor participation is way down, fewer people in the workforce. And then job postings, instead of hovering right there just around 4 million open jobs or 3.5 to 4 million open jobs, we're over 10 million open jobs. So from a supply demand standpoint, it's really driving this. But the bottom line is that prior to COVID till now, it's been a tumultuous ride, but right now there's still 4.2 million fewer people working than there was pre-COVID.
So Nick, quick question for you. So the news exhibits unemployment is 4.7%, right? So you're highlighting the U6 unemployment. What's the difference between what you're exhibiting and what we hear in the media?
Oh, great question, Jen. Yeah, everybody hears the what's called the U3 unemployment, and that's really those are people who are currently receiving unemployment benefits, for lack of a better definition. They try to say that those are just currently unemployed people, period, but that's not. They track that by unemployment benefits. And if you didn't apply for unemployment benefits, or you've just given up looking, or U6 includes people who are discouraged workers and people who have fallen off of unemployment but didn't necessarily get a job yet. It includes people who are underemployed. So there's a lot of people who can't get back to their full-time status, but they're working part-time, or they're waiting tables, or they're driving for Uber while they're waiting to get their controller job back. Does that make sense?
That does make sense. And for anybody in the audience as well, we also have a question panel. So as we're going through this and Nick is giving us this great data and information, if you'd like to ask questions, please do. And we will have a few minutes at the end as well for additional questions. Nick, you mentioned conversion ratios worst in history. Highlight that. Yep. Can you explain that to people who are not subject matter experts?
Yeah, great. Thanks, Jen, for keeping me honest. If I use industry terms or acronyms, make sure you stop and point that out. I want to make this as layman as possible. Conversion rates in the job posting world, recruiting statistics, there's a couple of conversion points. When somebody sees your ad, do they click on that ad? That's one conversion. That's the click-through rate. And then when they land on the ad, how many of them are clicking to apply? That's the number that we saw traffic going from September and October, traffic going up on clicks. There's a lot of people looking, but not a lot of them are clicking to apply. So the apply ratio is way off. That conversion is low. So even though there's a lot of tire kickers and there's a lot of people looking, at least in that August, September, and October period, worst conversion rates in history. So we were paying cost per click to try to drive those ads, but not getting a lot of conversions to apply. So demand, obviously 10.4 million jobs is way up, right? But the unemployment is also still supplies. There's a lot of people on the sidelines. So why are those applies way down? What's that about? Just a little bit more of a dive here. You can see here at the top, we ended November Q4. We were running right around 153 million people actively employed, and then we dropped, bam, right down there in April. We shed off about 22 million of those, and then pretty rapidly started clawing back 10 million. And so now we're here sitting at the end of October, and we're still about 20. We've been, what is that math there? Here, I've got a better slide for that to show you, but we're going to have 4.2 million people, still fewer in the workforce than we did prior to COVID. Now, where did those losses come from? That was not evenly dispersed. Everybody, I think, has heard this, but leisure, hospitality, food service, travel industry, the food and beverage, that was crushed, right? And then you have some business services, healthcare, and education and manufacturing. Those are other three areas that I'm sure a lot of your clients would fall into that were really hit hard by this.
Yeah, and I would say the bulk of the people that we've met with are clients. We did a panel recently with LifeStart, a small to middle market business incubator, and by far manufacturing is having the hardest time, restaurants, healthcare, but then you add in this additional layer, which we will not discuss on this webinar, but you add in the additional layer of vaccine mandates for employers over 100, right? And how that impacts people either remaining in your business or joining your business as well. So there's another compounding factor that we've heard recently.
Well, like you, our focus is the small to medium-sized businesses. So those vaccine mandates might be pushing a flood of employee or candidates into the market where small to medium-sized guys don't have the mandate, right? That's another deeper conversation. Yeah. I thought I'd share this too, because this is not just impacting the small guys. This is a picture I took in Erie, Pennsylvania, where you can see McDonald's is paying people $50 to come in for an interview, and Taco Bell is offering $1,000 signing bonus, right, to their frontline employees. Uber has released $250 million in bonuses and perks to lure back drivers. So it's not just you guys, so where are they?
I was going to say, you have all these signing bonuses, you have all these perks. Where are these people? And the other thing that I would note as a risk, right, is how are you, for our HR folks on the call, how are you policing this or creating a policy, for a better term, so that you're not hiring somebody, they're nabbing that $1,000 bonus, they're saying to unemployment that they actively look for work, and then they're out the door again, because that is a real cause for concern for people as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So where are they?
Well, okay, so in surveying a lot of them, this is information we've pulled together from a number of sources, but obviously one of the things you're talking to people on the sidelines, there still is some fear of exposure. The Delta variant caused another slowdown in people coming back to work. I'm afraid of what's going to happen with this Omicron thing, that, are we going to have more people saying, hey, I work in an environment that I would be exposed to a lot, so I'm not going back there yet. So the people are on the sidelines because of that. Childcare needs are huge. A lot of people are not talking about this enough. I remember during the last Great Recession, they called it the man session. Well, this is the she session. It's impacted women more than men, primarily because there's not consistent healthcare or even our childcare availability. You can't even count on your schools staying open, right? So working moms can't go back to work if they're not confident that their school is going to be in person consistently, or that they can get access to childcare needs. And even when it comes down to a married couple, that tends to fall more on our maternal side of our society than it does for the men. So it's impacted women, particularly women of color, worse than anybody. Also, another thing, very opposite of most recessions, is early retirement. So if you remember back, you had the housing crisis, which turned into the financial crisis, which turned into the Great Recession. Well, during that period, typical of a recession, that housing prices and values dropped precipitously. The stock market crashed terribly. So all those people who are sitting there 59, 62, 65 years old thinking that they were about to retire, now all of a sudden their home equity doesn't look so good, and their stock portfolio, their IRAs, their 401ks, that they decided they were going to work longer. Well, the opposite has happened here. People who have seen their home prices balloon up and their IRAs look pretty good, their 401ks, and the stock market's hitting new records every week. And so there's a lot of people who've said, you know what, I kind of like this working from home thing, or being off, and we've seen a big rush again in some of those areas that COVID impacted greatly, like education. A ton of teachers said, you know, I've been teaching in the classroom for 20 years and I know how to do that. This whole Zoom thing, hybrid, I'm out of here. Same with nursing, caregivers, another big area where people are saying, I'm retiring because it's too risky in that environment. Also, for a number of years, we've had lower immigration, and I'm talking legal H-1B visa, green card type of immigration that had been purposely driving down, and that's hurting our availability of workers. Now, we've had 1 million illegal immigrants come flooding over, but legal immigration has been going down, so that's hurt our availability for workers. This one is just anecdotally, I put this one in there because I hear it from so many people. There's been 10 million new retailer investors, meaning people who were never invested in the stock market. They get their Fidelity account, their Schwab account, their Robinhood was a big one, and they're out there, you know, doing meme trades or whatever. They took their PPP money and their stimulus money, and they opened up retail investment accounts. Meanwhile, it's like a rising tide lifts all boats, right? All these young kids in the stock market think that everything just goes up and to the right, and so maybe that's giving them more financial freedom, right? We talked about home values way up. Or is it perhaps some of this being fueled by the fact that it was a little too comfortable being unemployed? I mean, we talk about the extended and expanded unemployment benefits, health coverage. You automatically qualified for COVID with no copays. You couldn't get evicted, didn't have to pay back your student loan. So people had a sense of financial and time freedom that they never had. And so this great resignation is also bigger than a blip. This is more of a movement and not a trend. And what I mean by that is that this is people who have never had this flavor, this taste of freedom before, now want that. And so we're seeing a rotation. Like I said, there was 4.4 million people who quit in October and in September. So that negated most of the 5 million people who took jobs, right? And that's because of this shifting mindset. It turns out when you give people a 1.5 years paid vacation, it changes what they're willing to do, what they expect from life, their work-life balance. And now this, I'm sure, was not intentional, but and I don't know that I would have had a better solution. I understand that this was out of necessity and trying to keep people liquid and stay home or whatever. But the reality is the one size fits all additional benefits, and we made it a lot easier to be on benefits. We made it wider, and then we extended the time frame and expanded that. At the end of the day, there was the vast majority of people were receiving as much or more than they were when they were working their full-time job. But now they didn't have to spend money on their commute or childcare or dry cleaning or gas to get there, and they had all this time on their hands. So it's really changed that mindset. Did you have any questions on that, Jen?
No, I think we'll get into this in a later slide too, you know, highlighting employees are now setting different boundaries for work-life balance purposes. So as an employer, obviously we're talking today about attracting the right talent, retaining talent, but the focus around retaining is engagement. How are you listening to your employees? How do you make them feel heard? So it's not necessarily the days of, I say this all the time, the days of ping pong tables and free beer Friday are out the door, especially if you're in a remote environment. So how do you create a scalable culture, and how do you make sure that the employees that you have feel engaged and safe enough to ask for things that they may want, right? Which may be more flexibility to pick up their kids from school, things like that, because you're right, now they've gotten a taste of it. And setting boundaries and really giving employees tools around time management and things like that so they can balance both as well, I think is really important. So less work-life blending was how it was referred to before. Now we're back to work-life balance for sure, especially since a lot of people are at home.
Right, and as we get into the third portion of this, we get into more takeaways. What do you have to do now in this new environment? But in this section, still talking about how we got here and what's happened. I know that a lot of people are thinking, well, these unemployment benefits and moratoriums on mortgages and foreclosures and evictions, that has sunsetted, right? That's expired at various points throughout September, and that's true. But that nobody's talking about the fact that there's a whole bunch of other social programs, like if you add up all of the stuff with beyond unemployment benefits, like welfare, family and child services, rental assistance, Section 8 housing, Medicaid, that literally has doubled from $1 trillion in 2019 to $2 trillion. So there's a lot more people benefiting from those kind of safety nets. Even like SNAP food stamps has doubled in usage. Well, it's doubled in expenditure. It's actually only 2 million more people on there. But the point being is that I hear people all the time saying, well, people just aren't willing to work anymore. And the reality is that nobody was ever excited to go toil, right? If I'm standing over the hot stove flipping the burgers, or I'm digging the ditch, or I'm painting the ceiling, or I'm carrying the shingles up the ladder, it's probably because I need to put food on the table and because I need to pay the rent. It's not like I'm really self-actualized in my job. I'll tell you, the islands deal with this a lot, right? And in Tahiti, they called it the island paradigm. That you walk down the road, there's pineapples and bananas and papayas and guava. The sea is teeming with life, and it never really gets colder than 70 degrees. So you can't starve to death and you can't freeze to death. They have a hard time getting people to come do any sort of uncomfortable work. Now, and I'll tell you a quick little story. A couple of years ago, my wife and I were in Mexico doing one of these swim with the dolphins excursion. We're standing in the water basically up to our waist, and with herrings that we could feed these dolphins. They'd come down, lay down, and you could pet them, and they'd talk to you, they'd make noises. You make a motion, they would jump in the air 7 feet, right? Well, all around this enclosure was this in the open sea, there was a fenced off area, and you can see that the fence was sticking up 2 feet or 3 feet above the water line. And I said to the guy, that dolphin just jumped 7 feet. That fence is never going to keep him in here. And he said, that's not to keep the dolphins in, that's to keep the sharks out. And I said, well, how do you keep the dolphins here? The freedom is right there for them. They said, no, here we feed them. Out there, they have to work, they'd have to hunt, right? And so I don't know that it's necessarily a human thing. I think that we're all naturally, we need that. Necessity is the mother of invention, right? And food's a great motivator. But when you take those things away, sometimes you're gonna feel some of that problem.
That makes complete. I was going to say, so show us the numbers. What's the data?
Okay, so I highlighted some of the things. This is showing that we've come from. Let me get my cursor to move over here. Okay, so this is back in June. You remember we peeled off 22 million on in March and April. By the end of June, we still had 17 million people unemployed, and we're back up to about 7. So we've brought back, since June, we've clawed back about 10 million more employment. So things are definitely on the way up. The challenge is it's getting harder, because if you see this, we've been operating right around 61%, 61.5% at the labor participation rate, which means so we have a civilian population over the age of 16 of about approximately 262 million people, 161 million of which are working or willing to work, right? And so that leaves us with this is the labor participation rate. I'll show you as we go to the next slide. It's a little bit more clearer to understand. So prior to the
We've had
pandemic,
a shrinking workforce since the new millennium.
well, yes. But we're looking at a percentage of the. So we have an aging workforce, but we also we're not replacing ourselves at the same time. So you think about all of the boomers who are getting older and retiring, and we don't have, and this includes everybody over the age of 16, which really needs to be updated because I worked when I was 16, but I don't know anybody in my son's generation who were getting jobs when they were 16 years old. So even people now with college being the 13th grade, most people are quite often not entering the workforce until they're 20 or 21, and the whole Occupy Mom's Basement movement. But prior to the pandemic, we had about a 7-year run where we were operating right there around 63%, dropped way off. We've come back, but we're still, this is that 5.5 million fewer people participating in the workforce. Now here, this is really shocking. This is what shows, the labor participation doesn't tell you anything about the number of jobs out there. It's just people who are working or willing to work. This is really shocking. How many unemployed people are there per job opening? Since there are now 10.4 million open jobs, we have approximately 0.7 people per job to hire. So there are literally more open jobs than there are willing workers. And this is looking at it the opposite way. That was people to jobs. This is jobs per unemployed person. And it's the same thing. You can see where we were operating here, it was already getting to be a very tight labor market as we were in the economy just prior to that. But now we have this recession. We have 1.25 people or jobs per people that is out there. On this side, you can take a look at, this is also showing the impact of men versus women. We talked a little bit about that, where you can see where women are not coming back to the workforce at the same level as men because of the she session that we talked about. But you started mentioning a shrinking workforce. This one might scare you a little bit, but this is as a percentage. Remember, our population continues to grow, just not anywhere close to the rate of our GDP as it has been. And so as we are not replacing ourselves, this is where we're at with this shrinking labor force in terms of year over year percentage changes. And you can see the birth rate has been declining. This is 1990 to 2000, 2010 to 2020, and then this is projections for the next decade. Birth rates on the decline, death rates are holding fairly steady, and then immigration has been dropping.
And are the death rates, Nick, is that relative to taking into account COVID deaths or the death rate going up? What does that signify?
Oh, good eye. Yeah, you can see that for the next decade, they're seeing projecting a rise in death rates. But no, that's not anything to do with COVID. In fact, the excess death numbers have been up a little bit. I mean, it's shocking that we lost 750,000 people to COVID, but a lot of whom would have died from other instances or whatever. It shifted purpose. The excess death has not been greatly impacted, but this is just anticipating the aging population. I think the boomers are between 60 and 80 years old right now. So over the next decade, we're seeing that's a big chunk of the population that's entering into that phase of life.
And I think important to note as we transition to the next segment is there's also, as you mentioned, a different type of worker, right? So those boomers that are exiting the workforce may be retiring and then dying later on. It seems so morbid to even think that way, but are learning a different way than the people entering the workforce learned, right? So there's the shift in technology. There's, there are people that you find that don't even want to pick up the phone anymore, right? So there's a complete shift in how you're training and integrating people into the workforce to begin with.
Absolutely. Let's sum up this this second section here with the the realities that we're looking at. Like we said, when you give people a year and a half paid vacation, it shifts their mindset and what they're willing to do and not do. If you guys only absorb one thing from this, there's going to be a lot of statistics and stuff, but if you only take away one thing, it's that the world has changed. The candidates are squarely in the driver's seat. It's the candidate is king. We were heading towards this prior to the pandemic, which was certainly exacerbated by it, but we now live in this instant gratification world, right? Where I want that burger, but I want it delivered to my front door. I'm going to watch this show, but I'm going to sit here and binge watch 2 seasons of it. They want things fast and easy, mobile friendly. I'll tell you one thing that they're not willing to do anymore is they are not spending their days surfing from one job board to another job board, nor will they spend 40 minutes on some online application. We now have a smaller and older labor pool, so there are fewer fish in that pond. We talked about this massive labor participation rate. Some of that is the mentality of, I can sit here in this air-conditioned gym and be paid as the greeter checking identifications for $2 an hour less than doing that uncomfortable, hot, heavy, loud job over there. They've started to think that $2 isn't worth it. I think my quality of life is more important. Ask yourself, what would you be willing to do for $10 an hour, $12 an hour, $15 an hour, right?
Yep.
So what do they want? This is what we know from obviously, number one is wages, right? Everybody's trying to improve their income, but they want a job they don't hate, right? They want something that's meaningful, that's fulfilling. They want to feel like they've got input. But the number 2 thing after money is flexibility and work-life balance. The work from home mentality has impacted a lot of people, and a lot of people want to continue some level of that. They want to feel respect. Jen, you and I were having a conversation earlier about this, what you're seeing, what you're hearing that candidates are looking for. You said something about the ping pong table and the beer Friday not getting it done.
Yeah, it's definitely not. And it's culture is what you tolerate, right? It's not, benefits are not just health insurance. It's not freebies at work. It's making sure that people feel as though they matter and that they belong and have a purpose in what they're doing. And feeling part of the vision and the outcome of the organization has become more increasingly important, which is great, right? That's the direction we should be going in. So it's, again, another topic for another webinar, but developing your leaders and your managers who may not necessarily have that skill of painting that vision and getting your teams enrolled into that vision and allowing them to feel like they have skin in the game. That's where some development can absolutely come in, so that they're having those conversations so that employees feel heard.
Absolutely. And creating the culture, you're going to be speaking about that here in a little bit, but on the financial front, there's serious wage pressure. I think that I had some statistics here that, in October, you looked at the wage pressure went up year over year was 4.9%. That sounds high, but really, if you carve out hourly employees, it went up 11.9%. So year over year. So you really need to take a look at where your wages are, and that's going to hit your bottom line, which is going to cause you to have raised prices. The whole thing is cascading inflationary. Now, I don't want to get into politics or but it's unfortunate that our political leaders couldn't get on the same page to get the wage disparity and income disparity solved with improving like minimum wage levels and that type of a thing over in a controlled manner over a period of time. But COVID kind of did it for us, and it's ugly and it's painful and it's going to be highly inflationary, but wage pressure is real. And so the reality of work from home is what people are looking for. So how do you find people in this environment, right? Because what you were doing before isn't going to get it done.
And then, we had a partner of ours in manufacturing. It's like a vicious cycle, right? Because if you are not getting materials,
right.
One, you're not getting materials, or two, your materials are 30, 40% higher than they used to be, and you do not have receivables coming in the door because you're not producing, then where are you going to find the money to pay additional wages to have people be more engaged? And then on top of it, okay, let's say you don't have a materials issue, then you have a production issue because you don't have this talent. So you're not getting things out the door quickly enough. So it's this vicious cycle, right? And there's obviously the supply chain has a huge impact into this as well. So,
Absolutely.
all right. So labor, sticking to labor, what do we do now? How do we get in front of it? How do we help people find more people to be more productive?
Sure. So let's talk about that. So what you were doing before, right? Whatever it was, whether it was a sign in the window or a static ad on Indeed or some other old school job board, right? What was working before, because there was a lot of fish in the pond and they were hungry, right? That might have worked for you for a long time. Well, there are fewer fish in the pond and they're not as hungry, right? So you need to tempt them with something more than a piece of bread on the hook. But what the big guys are doing, what's how Starbucks is attracting talent, is different, right? They're dredge netting. And so we need to fight fire with fire. And what does that mean? What does it take now to find those candidates? Well, here's an example. So in my news feed on my Flipboard or whatever, popped up an invitation from Amazon and their hiring process. This is, I'll summarize it for you because nobody knows candidates, which by the way are consumers. Consumers and candidates are the same thing. Nobody knows consumers the way Amazon knows consumers. This pops up and it says, no resume required. You apply within 90 seconds. We guarantee to reach back to you within 3 business days. And the entire process from first phone screen to offer will take no more than 3 days. That's that instant gratification. Make it easy, make it mobile friendly. That's what candidates are how they're trying to consume jobs. Amazon has no problems hiring, by the way. But so what Amazon is doing there is a digital advertising campaign, and that's what Workberry does with through Empower. But basically, in the world of digital advertising, right, the least effective type of digital advertising there is a static job ad on a job board. And that's because a job board is a dynamic page. It's automatically sorted to show the newest jobs on top. So you pay Monster $379 or whatever for a 30-day campaign. But by the end of day one, your ad's no longer on page one. It's just moved down things. So we call that the rule of 72. You get about 72% of all of your candidate traffic within the first 72 hours, but you paid for a 30-day ad. So, you know, there's a better way. And this is how for 10 years, well, 12 years now, the Fortune 1000 have been doing this. They treat the job ad like any other product or service, right? They buy the digital inventory, including, of course, all the job boards, on a cost per click or cost per apply basis, and they can reduce their cost and increase their reach considerably. And so that's one of the things we have to do. And then, of course, where that ad goes, it's of course it's all on all of the job sites, but you also want to be on those niche sites. We did this manufacturers campaign in Erie and Toledo, and you know, we were getting more traffic off of 84 Lumber and Harbor Freight Tools and the fantasy football site. Professional sites are important too, like nurses. We get a lot of them off of where they get their ongoing certification training or their LinkedIn group for nurses, or where they buy their shoes. So
it's basically marketing, right? So I can be talking about some great shoes and all of a sudden on my Instagram, an hour later, those shoes are popping up. So it's a similar concept. You're marketing the jobs versus having people, you're hunting the hunters versus them fishing and finding you, which is awesome. And for those of you joining us today, we are actually partnered with Workberry, and in the near future, you will hear more about some of what we can assist you with relative to this. Next gen.
Absolutely. You need to go where the candidates live on the internet, not just, you know, only 22% of the labor pool is normally, right now it's really high, but it's normally active or current on one or more of those job boards. But they all are on Instagram and they're on Facebook and they use search engines. So you need to go where they are. So let's wrap this up. What do you do moving forward? Moving into the third section. Okay, we've given the outline, the lay of the land, how we got here. What do you need to do differently? So right now, when you're looking for candidates, I know in the job advertising world, I shouldn't tell anybody to not spend their money, but if you could wait, depending on your cost of vacancy, we should see some improvement. By the way, it's going to continue to be a very tight labor pool for a very long time. We're looking at a decade or more of this. So, so that we're not going to swing that pendulum, but it's improving. It's improved from September to October. It's improved from October to November. The jobs report coming out on Friday, I think we'll see a lessening of the resignation and more net new jobs kind of thing. But you'll see an improvement by it might be February or March. But if your restaurant is not open 2 or 3 days of the week because you can't staff, you can't afford to wait. If you're losing, if you're losing business, I think that SHRM, you might know this off the top of your head, Jen, but I think SHRM estimated cost of vacancy for the typical small business for entry level people at about just shy of $500 a week, right? So spending, $500 to advertise a job is a no-brainer, right? But if you can wait, you might want to wait. Number two, use technology and automation to reduce personnel needs, right? What that means is we've experienced this now where quick service restaurants are not opening their doors, putting everybody through drive-through because they can handle more volume with less people. Or you go in, you get your ticket on the kiosk now, right? Anything you can do in your business to use technology and reduce your headcount needs, because again, we're going to be in a tight labor market for a long time. And I don't know if this was appropriate to use the word sucked on a webinar, but
we're all adults, rated NC-17, we're good.
review all your roles. If you're trying to hire right now for an uncomfortable job, a loud job, a hot job, anything that's uncomfortable, or you have to face consumer, I'd like to say that there's more than a bifurcation. I don't know if this is a word, but a trifurcation of the labor force. You got professional white collar crowd, and then within the hourly you have public facing and non-public facing. That public facing roles are really those are the people who are quitting, right? Because they're tired of dealing with rude customers or difficult situations like that. So if you've got a hard job, a dirty job or whatever, what can you do to make it better, to make it more improved, right? To make it something that you wouldn't hate doing.
And this is a great bullet. I really like this one, Nick. Repair your digital presence. Mm-hmm. I think, we've gone through quite a number of facelifts here at Empower HR this year with our website and branding and so forth. Your employees are your number one employment ambassador, your brand ambassador. They speak your culture, they can emulate, they're all on social media for the most part, right? So get them engaged, have brand guidelines for your employees, just, when you're out doing give back events or you're on site with a client and having a great interaction, sharing those stories. Throughout the course of the last 2 years in these series of webinars, we've talked about the power of storytelling, and your employees are the best people with them. So how do you want to attract great people? You do it through your digital presence with the people that you have that are part of your culture, that are engaged and excited to be there.
Absolutely, well stated. And I'd say I would only add that candidates are going to see you first somewhere in the digital world and probably from a mobile device. And so make sure it's mobile friendly and that you have a good online presence and a good online reputation. Yep. The other thing we just talked about, if you're searching, you have to use current technology. A job board or two is just so 2015. You need to get beyond the boards. And one thing for this crowd I really want to specify is a job description is not a job advertisement, right? And so you're competing with Starbucks and Amazon and Walmart, and they get it. And so you might need a little help there. And the other thing that we've talked about is this, what candidates are not willing to do and spend all that time. And that if I get it, by the way, your manufacturing, you mentioned some jobs are dangerous, right? You need to have a drug test, or you need to do an assessment, a skills assessment, or a personality assessment, or take see their portfolio, even their resume, or fill out a complete job application. Any of these things that are friction, you will need to put that further back in the process. In your candidate experience needs to be fast and friendly and mobile and easy. You can apply in 90 seconds from a cell phone, because what matters to you isn't what high school they went to or whatever. you want to ask those 4 or 5 or 6 qualifying questions that matter for you about this job. Do you have a current CDL driver's license? Are you willing to take a random drug test? What is your experience level with C# development? These are the ones, so you don't want to look at 30 candidates. You want to look at the 3 that really tick your box, but make it fast and easy.
Compensate, yeah, this is a great one. Reviewing compensation and total rewards. Again, people want to make sure that they are paid a fair wage, but they're also looking for other things. Are you investing in development for your employees? Are you giving them an allowance for tuition reimbursement or coaching, things like that? Looking at total rewards, maybe taking into account you have a large population of women in your workforce, maybe fertility benefits, things of that nature, really being innovative. You know, back in the day, I worked for a startup and the tagline was innovate or die. And I think that having an open mind and being courageous enough to innovate and looking at the way you compensate people beyond just dollars and cents is so critically important.
Absolutely, well stated, well stated. So lower your expectations. Now, I'm not, I want to really speak to this for a second, specifically about experience. For decades, with a couple of tiny little exceptions, for decades, you have been in the driver's seat. You had a coveted job and there was a line of people willing to get that job. So you could raise those expectations. Well, I'm going to require a college degree for this job. Really? It doesn't, there's no reason for that. Or I want 3 to 5 years of experience in HVAC experience. So I see a lot of this where people are not accepting somebody who doesn't have experience in there when studies have shown, Indeed did a big study on that, or no, it was LinkedIn did a big study on this, that industry experience gives a person an advantage, a leg up for about 90 days, after which it levels out. And so if you take a look at your best employees, you can say, what makes Sally a star? Is it really because she went to an Ivy League school, or is it really because she got a degree in marketing or whatever? You need to start broadening your experience and saying, hey, it's the build or buy. We can train this people. So I'm talking to some manufacturers that are saying, look, I don't need CNC machine experience anymore. If you find me somebody who can show up, who wants to work and can learn and can pass the drug test, I'll hire them. I'll teach them what I need to know. So those are the things when I say lower your expectations a little bit. And then
you can teach skill, you can't teach heart, Nick.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And embrace the work from home, flexible hours, expand geography. I'm going to tell you right now that I get it. You can't cut hair remotely. You can't run a CNC machine from your office at home, right? There's some things that can't be done remotely. However, that doesn't mean you can't add some flexibility. Do you really, as long as they put in the hours, would you be okay with a 410s, right? If they hit their production supply memory, would it bother you if they got to leave at 3 o'clock to pick their kids up at school and see a soccer game and come back and work till 8 o'clock at night? This is the kind of thing that you need to start thinking differently, because if your job can be done remotely, you will have 10 times the number of candidates than if you say, nope, I want them to come in here to do the accounting that they can absolutely do from home. And that way you could, and by the way, if you happen to be in what has traditionally been a low cost of living area, you're going to have even more wage pressure, because I was able to hire CNC machinists for $9.75 an hour for all these years because Erie is a cheap place to live or whatever. Well, that guy can now take a job as a CSR for a company or an inside sales job or whatever for a company that's in San Diego or Boston or San Francisco, and they think paying $13 an hour is a bargain, right? So you're going to be competing with that because those are the work from home types of wages. Oh, sorry, Jen, do you want to talk about childcare?
Just in terms of going back to what we said in terms of total rewards and benefits, thinking about childcare options, there are some larger organizations that do provide on-site daycares and things like that. That may seem inundating and like a lot, but just being open-minded and flexible to other options out there. Maybe there's dependent care outside of actually putting aside dependent care, but making sure that you're reminding your employees of that.
Absolutely. I mean, if you can help them solve the childcare issue, you are going to be an employer of choice. I mean, if you put childcare on site, or you will compensate them or subsidize their childcare options locally, completely get it. And then this one is, I got to spend a second on respond fast. And what I mean there is, in this market, and I mean hours, within hours, not days. So I can't tell you how often I hear our client success managers calling up saying, you hear things like, "Hey Bob, good news. You had 12 new good-looking candidates in your portal. Bad news, you haven't gotten back to anybody for 4 days. They're gone, man. They're not waiting around." If in this market, if somebody is putting their hand up saying, "I'm willing to work," they've got options, lots of them. So I mean, we had people saying, hiring managers saying, they came in yesterday, I called them today, and they said they accepted a job somewhere else. I'm like, why'd you wait a day? But here's an alarming statistics. Even after the initial reach out, when you get that candidate saying, "I'm interested," you have a quick phone interview, then you're going to put them into your normal onboarding process, and Jen's going to talk a little bit about that. But if you take a week before your initial interview to move forward, you're going to lose 19% of them. If you go 2 weeks, you lose an additional 43%, and if 3 weeks, another 15%. So that total adds up to about 77% of people who you need to get back to quickly. And what do they do when they don't feel like you gotten back to them quickly? 49% report that they will ghost you, meaning that when you do call, they'll say, yeah, sure, I'll take that interview, and then not show up. I'm sure some of you guys have experienced that. Or they'll blacklist the company, so they don't want your jobs to show up on their job feeds anymore. Or they'll vent to people on social media, or worse, they can post a negative review. This is back to that what you were talking about, Jen, with your digital presence. You need to manage that and take it seriously. So what else you need to continue to do beyond the candidate generating period of time? I think, Jen, I'm going to unlock these buttons, and you can speak to some of this. But one of the things on that process, when you have that first initial call with someone, by the way, I'm not talking about an automated response, like an email message that says, "We've received your thing. Thank you. We'll be in touch." And then it's a week later, "We're still considering your stuff. Thank you." It's got to be personal. And if you're hiring hourly people at all, they're not email people. So text and phone calls, that's what I would, and make it personal if you can communicate that.
Yeah, I fully agree with that, Nick. And I think taking an approach of how would you treat your customers, you're going to want to respond. You're going to want to have a quick response to those customers. And what's the experience, the candidate experience that you're creating? Even taking simple things into account, right? If somebody is scheduled for a 2 p.m. interview and you don't jump in that conference room with them until 2:10, what's the first impression is a very lasting impression. Obviously things happen, right? So if you run over on something, just explaining and asking for grace. I see a lot in our organization when there is someone interviewing, the person that's interviewing the candidate will walk the person around, introduce them to smiling faces, get them to know who is there. So that's another thing to create that really great candidate experience. Creating an alumni plan. In all fairness, I've usually been of the mindset of this is not a revolving door. If you choose to leave, that's because you think that the grass is greener, right? But I'm now being more open-minded to saying, if you had a star candidate who left and went to a bigger organization and realized that they made a huge mistake, which I think over the next 18 to 24 months, we'll start seeing that, making sure that you're open-minded. And obviously they have to go through the interview process like any other candidate would, but creating an alumni plan. Interviewers and hiring managers, I agree, Nick, will make or break you. Absolutely. Going back to that client experience, what's the type of feeling that you want to create? And does your organization have a consistent interview guide, right? That you are screening for skill, you're screening for heart, but these candidates are screening you as well. So what are the talking points that you have in an interview with a candidate to make sure that it's consistent with your brand? Pre-boarding and onboarding, we talked about this at the start a little bit. You do not want to get down a path with an amazing person, have them start on day one and be like, my interview experience was awesome. My onboarding stunk. I'm out. I made the wrong decision, right? Because again, that is extremely costly to an organization. Meeting the team, I think, is so critical. Just listening, hearing what people have to say. When you're hiring people, it's because you're hiring people to make your organization better. You're hiring people because they have a different skill set or talent set that is going to level you up. So they come with ideas. Ask people for ideas, engage them, and have them say, hey, what was the experience for you when you interviewed and when you joined, and how can we do better on the next one? 1 week, 1 month review. Obviously, we do 30, 60, 90-day check-ins, but also remembering that feedback is so critical. People are hungry for feedback now. Not doing an annual performance review, having coaching conversations with your employees consistently so that they know where they stand. And the last one is my favorite, is walking the talk and building a culture. Again, culture is what you tolerate. You can be all talk and not act. So employees are watching that. People are saying, hey, you can have a list of culture things and pillars up on your wall, but if you are not walking the talk, then this is just words, right? So how are you acting and ensuring that your leaders, your managers are all following suit that way? And it will speak for themselves, because if you have an employee referral program, people are going to be hungry to get their friends and other people that they've worked with into the door. Making sure you have a great employee referral program bonus. So having some financial upside for your employees. Again, your employees are your best brand ambassadors and your best salespeople as it pertains to your business. I realize we went over a little 150. I was looking, there are not any questions out here right now. Feel free to throw one out if you'd like. But Nick, anything else that we can take away? This has been super informative, and I think I personally learned information that I didn't have before, and things to think about. And overall, it's a huge undertaking for the small to middle market right now. And as you said, we obviously don't want to be a doomsday webinar, but this is not going to get any easier.
Yeah, and I would just say that you know, it would have been nice had we were able to do this type of pendulum swing over a decade, right? But COVID has made this happen fast, and you know, it's unfortunate, but the large enterprises are moving fast. They are addressing this stuff: culture, wage, benefits. So you need to become an employer of choice in a hurry. And then you also need to, the one button you didn't say on this one is expanding your reach, right? Meaning that if this job could be done by a 22-year-old, it could probably be done by a 17-year-old. If you've had the mindset, because you had so many choices in the past, you say, I don't want to hire somebody at 55 years old. I'm going to have to, you know, replace them in 5 years. That person may work till they're 80. You know, you have to expand that group and be willing to take the people who are willing. And then there's a large immigration population that, you know, if they're not customer facing, do you care how they present, or their speech patterns, or their diction, or whatever that they, you know, you want to, even if they don't speak English, you may have, as long as somebody there can communicate with them, you may really broaden your reach if you include those people.
So Nick, that's a great segue into one question that we had, and we can wrap with this. There were a couple questions saying, will we send out slides? We will send out the recording as well as a copy of the presentation, so you will have that. But there was a question that came up: suggestions for those of us hiring for in-person roles, convenience stores, restaurants, etc. Nick, any thoughts on that?
Yeah, so those are part of that. I would put them in with the QSR roles. So and those are like quick service restaurant types. You're competing, the same people, you're competing with Subway and McDonald's and Burger King and those kind of people. Well, the cost to advertise to get in front of those people has gone up 1,000%. So we buy the inventory on a cost per apply, basic cost per click. And back in April and May, quick service restaurant staff was costing us around $4 per apply. So we were paying per click to how many clicks did we need to generate and apply, and it was coming in around $4. Now, in last month, it was $41. So what McDonald's and Burger King are doing, not only are they spending a lot more for the clicks, they're also offering that $1,000 bonus or whatever. So that's the area where we just to say, using all your local stuff, like take your quick apply link and put that on your community college for free, or put that on Craigslist for $40, or put that in your Facebook feed in your workers, and send your employees to do referral programs. But then you gotta, let's say that walk the walk, you gotta make that job, how do you make it more appealing, right? Because for the same money, I can sit at the gym and scan people's gym, their membership to make sure they're the right person. So that's where you're going to probably have to pay more, and then and I know that's unfortunate, and that's going to reflect in your prices, but that's kind of where we are right now.
Last question. I know we're at time, but this is an important one. I talked about partnering with Empower HR here, and so there was a question around how we can work with you, Nick, at Workberry to provide support to our client base. So let's wrap with that.
Yeah, contact your Empower representative. They have a couple. I love how Empower's doing it. They have the option, the self-serve option. But if you also need help writing the job description or screening your candidates, and they offer kind of a hybrid solution, so you can get the best of both worlds there. And I'm really looking forward to that. So contact your Empower rep, your sales rep, or your customer success person, and they'll get you probably with, was it Diane and Jessica, right?
Yeah, so overall, we will send out in the next couple months. We have a couple clients that are piloting right now, and once this is all squared away, we will announce the more formal program for all clients. But in the meantime, if you do have an imminent need and would like to move forward, just reach out to your HR business partner or your client experience lead, and we'll get you all taken care of. Nick, this has been super informative. Thank you so much for your time. We appreciate your partnership. I think we might have missed one section, but this was a ton of content. It was excellent, and we appreciate everybody, and thank you so much for making time. And we look forward to having more discussions with you around talent attraction, retention, and how we can help you solve for this challenge. So have a great, for those of you who celebrate Hanukkah, happy Hanukkah, and have a great rest of your holiday season. Thank you, Nick.
Thank you. You're welcome. Bye now.